Hey travelers, do you like to be connected to the internet? Of course you do. You are right now. This video is being sponsored by Airalo, a service I have actually been using for a couple years now. Airalo is a free app you can download, and they offer eSIM support for over 200 countries around the world, including Germany for that Christmas market river cruise, the entire Mediterranean, USA, Mexico, Bahamas, and I'm gonna say almost basically anywhere in the world you're gonna be traveling. You download the app for free, pick out the country you're gonna be visiting, install the eSIM before you leave, very important, and then as soon as you get off the plane, you turn off your normal carrier and turn on the eSIM from Airalo. As far as my experience goes, it's always been super easy, and I just love knowing when I get there, as soon as I get off the plane, or as soon as the ship gets into port, I'm going to be able to open up Google Maps, I'm going to be able to order an Uber, or I'm going to be able to check into my flight on the last day of the cruise. Go to try.airalo.com/veryunofficialtravelguide, no S, and enter code unofficial3 for $3 off your first eSIM from Airalo. And now, on to the video. Medical emergencies, loud private conversations, and vloggers gone wild. It is Sunday, August 24th, 2025, and on this week's edition of Sunday Sofa Time, we're talking about my preview cruise on the Star of the Seas.
Just like the wind, just let it pass through, just let it pass you. You do what you
I just got back home to Hamburg yesterday from our preview cruise on the Star of the Seas. It was like 89 degrees when I left Orlando, and here in Hamburg, it's 65. In this video today, I'm going to show you a little bit around the ship, but this is mostly a story time style video. When you're on a cruise ship, when you're visiting a theme park, when you're any place where thousands of people get together, inevitably, you're going to see some things happen like the things that I'm going to talk about today. People acting right and people acting very wrong. I've already posted a video of our first day getting to the ship and boarding the ship and my first impressions. And in the next couple of weeks here on the Very Unofficial Travel Guides, most of the videos are going to be about our experience on board. I'm going to show you a bunch of things on board that cost extra, some of them a lot extra. A detailed look around the cabin. We're going to talk about the shows, which were really good. We're going to take a look at how crowded Coco Cay is when there's two gigantic cruise ships in port, and a lot more. So I just wanted to let you know that even though we're not going to take a big look inside the ship in this video, there is a lot of that coming. First person I noticed on this cruise acting a little bit wrong happened at Sail Away. This was a really exciting sail away. In fact, somebody organized a watch party down on land. This is just something that I overheard somebody talking about. So as we were sailing out of Port Canaveral over on land in, I think it's called Jetty Park, a bunch of people had gotten together to watch the ship sail out and wave to us, and they had even made a sign that said Bon Voyage. This was a really cool thing to see, and I think it was also cool for the people down on land to just watch this gigantic cruise ship sail past so close to them. And there was a guy next to me, like right next to me at the railing, in a swimsuit with no shirt on, which was, you know, okay, because it is the top deck. And I think he had already been enjoying the drink package, because the first thing that he did, which I thought was a little bit off, in the middle of a bunch of strangers standing all around him at the railing watching the land pass by, he let out a really loud burp. You know, can happen, but he seemed to be kind of forcing it. And then, right after that, he looked down on land and noticed all the people holding up the letters that spelled Bon Voyage, and like 2 or 3 of them were holding them a little bit lower than everybody else in the row, and he screamed down, "Hold them up higher, you f***ing imbeciles!" Nice. You know, I think it's okay if maybe you think that, but it's not like this guy paid for them to be there. Well, I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe that was his party. Maybe. But you know, do you need to scream it out in front of a bunch of strangers and then to these people who I assume were just there on their own free will trying to do something nice? I'm sure they didn't hear him, but a lot of other people did, and it was just rude and uncalled for, and honestly, trashy. This guy just kind of gave me sort of a trashy vibe. I'm sorry. The next thing involves a woman sort of overstepping boundaries, maybe being somewhat rude, but not as like crass as this guy was. On the second or third day, I spent a little bit of time down at guest relations. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. There were several minutes where I was just standing there waiting for something to happen, and in that time, I was noticing what was going on around me. Next to me, there was a woman who was I'm going to say complaining. She was talking about some problems she was having with the people who were in the cabin next to her, with things they were leaving in the hallway, and also the noise level. And when she first started her speech about what was going on, she was leaning on the front of the counter, very personable, very relaxed. She seemed like somebody who has no problem talking to strangers. So first she was leaning on the front of the counter, and then she wanted to see what the crew member was typing on the screen, so she kind of looked around the screen, and then she ended up leaning on the side of the counter to sort of get a view of the screen and the crew member. And eventually she took another step. She was behind the counter, and I don't remember hearing the crew member ask her, "Can you just come back here and make sure what I'm writing here is correct?" She just kind of, from her own free will, slowly moved her way around the counter until she was standing on the same side that the crew member was. I personally would never get the idea to walk behind that counter and look at the screen unless somebody specifically asked me,
"Walk behind the counter, please, and look at the screen."
And while I was waiting there and had so much time to sort of observe what was going on around me, unfortunately, I saw a woman take a big spill. At this point, the person I was speaking with at the front desk asked me to have a seat. There were seats under a stairway right in front of guest relations, and over to the side of me by the elevators, I heard a boom, boom, boom. Oh, Lord! And I looked over and saw that, yeah, an older woman had just sort of fallen down. I don't know if she had tripped over her own feet or something on the ground, but she fell. And I didn't see her fall, but I heard it, and it sounded bad. So immediately there were a bunch of people around her. Their crew went there. The security team showed up. Just to fast forward a little bit, a few minutes later, she was standing up, so I assumed she was okay, but she had even fallen on her face. So she had an ice pack on her cheek over here. She must have gone down really hard, and I felt really bad for her. Y'all know I've been to the medical center on cruise ships. It's one of the stories in my book, Getting Stitches on a Cruise Ship. Surprise, surprise, that's a story in a book with that title. And I'm assuming this woman ended in the cruise ship medical center as well to get a thorough examination just to make sure that nothing was really injured with her, and probably to make sure that the reason that she fell wasn't because she had a stroke. And speaking of medical problems, our whole cruise started later because of a medical emergency on board. So here's a little insider information if you haven't been on a cruise before. If they ever make a shipwide announcement, Alpha, 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 and then say a location on the ship, that's because there is some kind of medical emergency happening that needs attention there right now. And shortly before we were supposed to sail away, there was an Alpha, Alpha, Alpha call on board, and not too long after that, a fire engine and an ambulance showed up and was waiting outside the ship. And in fact, I did see somebody taken out of the ship on a stretcher. I didn't film it, but I did see it. And after that was taken care of, we finally could sail away. Question, have you ever seen anybody like take a nasty fall on a ship? Or maybe have you ever like tripped down the stairs or tripped up the stairs? You know, you can trip up the stairs too, believe me. Okay, now I'm gonna tell you why I spent so much time at guest relations. My partner Marcus and I have been together for 20 years. We're not married, but we wear rings. Can you see it? Can you see it? Can you see it? They're just sort of like a symbol of our relationship with each other. And to me, it's something very important. Well, on the second or third day of the cruise, I realized I had lost my ring. I know exactly how it happened too. I was down in the cabin and I wanted to put on some sunscreen before I went up to the top deck to film some more footage for one of the upcoming videos. And to put on the sunscreen, I took off my ring and put it in the pocket of my shorts.
Big mistake.
Because then, when I was up on the top deck, sitting down on certain benches, laying down on certain sunbeds, eventually the ring found its way out of my pocket and onto the pool deck. And I didn't realize it until much later, and you might be able to imagine that I totally panicked. This was a really big deal for me, and I was really sad about it. The first thing I did was go back down to the cabin and turn like everything upside down, thinking maybe I left it there. When I realized it wasn't in the cabin, that's where I kind of pieced together, oh yeah, that's right. I put on sunscreen, I put it in my pocket. It must have fallen out of my pocket. The first thing I did after that was go to all the places I was on the top deck where I knew I sat down and laid down to see if it was laying around there someplace. It wasn't, so I went to the front desk to file a missing property report. And this was a whole big ordeal that took a lot more time than I expected, was more thorough than I expected, and involved the security team. I might make a whole other video about that whole experience because that was also, it was much different than I expected. After I had done the first part of my missing property report thing with the person at the front desk, they asked me to have a seat while I wait for the security team to come, and then the whole process continued with the security team and the cameras. And while I was waiting there, that's where I saw the woman fall down, and I got into a conversation with the guy next to me who I think was waiting for his wife, who was waiting to talk to somebody at guest relations. And let me just remind you again, I was not in a good state emotionally when this was happening. I told him, yeah, I'm about to have a nervous breakdown because I think I lost my engagement ring and I'm worried that I'm never gonna get it back. And yeah, I'm just kind of holding it together right now. And this dude, you know, I don't know this guy, but still, what I would have liked to hear from a stranger at that moment would have been, oh, dang, geez, that sucks. Well, you know, they have cameras here everywhere. Somebody's gonna find it. Somebody's gonna turn it in. Don't worry, man. You're gonna get it back. Just, you know, just be patient and try not to let it ruin your day. That's what I needed to hear at that point, or what would have helped me feel a little bit better. But this dude said to me, you lost your ring? You're never getting that back. And I was like, oh, gee, thanks. That's just what I needed to hear right now. So obviously you can see somebody did turn it in. I did get it back. I immediately FaceTimed Marcus and told him what happened and erupted into tears. But yeah, the ring's back and that's fine. Oh, another thing I saw while I was sitting there after I had spoken with the guy who was very realistic in that situation. There was another guy sitting there in this little seating area. He was wearing sandals and he started picking at his toenails. Gross. I'm kind of old school in the sense that I feel like people shouldn't be clipping, polishing their nails in public places. And I definitely don't think people should be picking their nose or like, you know, putting their foot up and like really digging in there, getting stuff out of their nails in public places. What is wrong with people? I mean, whatever that is in underneath your toenail, yeah, get it out. But don't do it in front of me in a public place, and please go wash your hands when you're done. I didn't grow up like in an ivory tower with servants or anything like that, but still, that's, you know, there's just certain things that I feel like are wrong to do in public, and picking junk out of your toenails is definitely one of them. Okay, next thing that happened I saw on Coco K, and it's not somebody purposefully acting rude, but it is an unfortunate incident that I witnessed. I was walking from A to B to get from one of the restaurants to one of the beaches to see how crowded it was there. That was the focus of this video that will be coming soon. What does it feel like on Coco K when the Star of the Seas and the Utopia of the Seas are both parked there? You might be surprised. Stay tuned for that one. But yeah, I was walking down a path and I saw a young man, I'm gonna say he was probably like 19 or 20, standing in a weird position sort of towards the edge of the path, looking into the bushes. And I thought, that's a weird place to stand. I wonder, what's he looking at? What's out there? And then as I was getting closer, I saw him start to do this. And we all know what comes after that. Yeah, this poor guy just projectile vomited all over the bushes. Who knows why? I don't know, you know, if he was hungover or had drunk too much. I don't know why, but I know what. I walked past him as quick as I could and found a crew member there on the island to let them know, yeah, there's a guy back there. I don't think he's feeling too good. Maybe you could go check up on him. Poor dude. I hope it was just like a one-time thing and it didn't ruin the rest of his cruise. Of course, when a crew member catches you puking, I think that's also going to lead to a visit in the medical center because they need to be sure that you don't have norovirus and aren't going to be spreading it to the rest of the ship. The next thing that happened was also on Coco Cay, and it was another instance of people being pretty rude, and it was in my face.
My face?
So towards the end of my time on the island, I went swimming in the ocean, and it was just, oh, people, it was so hot. I want to go swimming now. And I have sunscreen in my bag, but honestly, I am so sweaty right now. It's literally dripping down me that I think it's not going to make a difference. If I try to put sunscreen on, it's not going to like attach to my skin anyways. It was hot every day, but especially on Coco Cay, just walking around in the sun, I was melting. And there is a tram service that runs around the island to most of the beaches and other highlights, and then back to sort of a central transportation hub right by where the pier meets the island. And because I was so hot and been walking around for most of the afternoon, I decided, all right, I'm going to take this transportation back to the pier. It'll be nice to sit down and get some wind in my face. And there was a little bit of a line of people waiting to get on this tram when it arrived. And I'm going to say there's probably only, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12. There's probably like 24 seats in each of these trams if it's a double one. If it's a single one, I think it's only like 12 or 15 seats maybe. The tram pulled up, a lot of people got off who were going to that beach. The line moved forward, people in the line filled in the empty seats, and there was one row where there was nobody sitting, so I went into that row and moved all the way over, so the 2 seats, there were only 3 seats, I'm sitting on the end, and I left the 2 seats next to me open so that anybody else who was coming would be able to easily get in. A couple came up, stood right next to the row, looked at the 2 seats, looked over at me, and then they looked at each other and said, yeah, let's take the next one. What? I turned around to the guys behind me, who turned out to be really funny guys, and I said, do I look like threatening or something? Why wouldn't they sit with me? The one guy on the left of me said, oh, I'm sorry, man. Do you want me to come up and sit with you? I'll sit with you. That was funny. But yeah, so I ended up having a whole row to myself, and these people had to wait for the next tram just because they didn't want to sit next to me. The next 2 things I want to talk about involve people having private conversations in public places, which is also something I just don't really understand nowadays. The Star of the Seas has 2 big elevator banks, and I mean big. There are 12 elevators in each of these 2 elevator banks, and they're the kind of elevators where you choose the floor outside and then it tells you which elevator to go to. Love that. Yeah, and even though there's a lot of elevators, there's a lot of people on board, so most of the time when you're like in front of the Windjammer or down in the promenade, if you're waiting for the elevator, there's gonna be other people waiting around there too. And one time while I was waiting there, a woman was having a FaceTime conversation with somebody on her telephone and didn't have headphones in. She had the volume up loud so everybody could hear the conversation. And I don't know who this person on the other end was talking about, but it was somebody important to the woman who was holding the phone, and the person on the other end was informing her that whoever this was, their son or mother or whoever, had gotten so drunk that she drove her car into a golf cart. And to this woman out there, if you happen to be watching this video and now think, oh my gosh, how can he be telling my business here on the internet? I can only say to you, if you don't want people to know and talk about your business, then don't talk about your business in front of people. And as far as I'm concerned, the next one is way worse. I have diamond status in the Crown and Anchor frequent cruiser club with Royal Caribbean that provides me with certain perks, and one of these perks is a separate lounge that we can go to just for us. There's snacks like cookies and raw vegetables there all day. Yay, raw vegetables! There's also a fancy coffee machine, and then they have cocktail hours and things like that. But this Crown Lounge area on the Star of the Seas, even though it's the biggest cruise ship in the world, is quite small. By the way, it's also indoors with no windows, so it's really not some place that I would want to go to hang out for very long. But I wanted to check it out, so I walked in there, and yeah, I mean, there's maybe place for like 30 people to sit in certain little areas around, and then the buffet and a desk where at certain hours there's a concierge. Another situation where a woman had her laptop flipped open. She was speaking to somebody in a video conference. She was not using headphones. People, why don't you use headphones? It's just so easy. And she was having a loud conversation where everybody in the room could hear what she was saying and what the person in the video was saying, and the person in the video was saying, yes, she's having some gynecological issues too, so she's not been getting her period, and they've been trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, for me, I just can't imagine. Why would you talk to somebody about those things in a public place where you know so many other people are listening. If I had been sitting in there and trying to relax or enjoy my time in there, I think I would have asked the woman to halt the conversation. Talking about personal medical issues, feel like it doesn't belong there. All right, final thing that happened on the ship, and then I have two sort of bonus things that happened on my flight. As I've talked about, this was a preview cruise, meaning it happened before the official first cruise. So the cruise after us was the cruise where they did, I think, a lot of press and the naming ceremony. And I think the first cruise after that one is the inaugural cruise. So a lot of people on the cruise I was on were invited because they are high rollers in the casino club or travel agents or other sort of, I'm just going to say, special people. I was not invited to come on this cruise from Royal Caribbean. I was invited because a friend of mine is a high roller and she got the cruise and was able to take me with her. But there were so many content creators on this sailing. I'm one of them, I know. You could basically not go anywhere or do anything without, I'm gonna say, risking being in somebody's YouTube video. Mine included, I know. So that's one thing that you should consider. If you ever have the chance to go on one of these preview cruises, you just need to be aware that there are gonna be people with iPhones, with cameras, with things on selfie sticks, little cameras, big cameras with big fuzzy microphones. There are people filming everything, everywhere, all the time, including me. I try to be very aware of the situation around me when I'm filming. I really don't like to be obvious when I'm trying to record things. I know how much people pay to be on these trips, and I don't want to bother them. I don't want to distract them. I want them to do what they want to do and not feel like they have to wait or be disturbed by me doing what I'm doing. And unfortunately, I saw on this trip several instances of influencers, content creators, vloggers, Instagrammers, TikTokers, whatever category they fit into. I saw a lot of them acting exactly the opposite. And I have to apologize in the name of content creators all over the world for the people who act like these people do. Just try to remember, we don't all act like that. And I'm an example. Sorry, I was getting all heated up talking about that. I had to take off my sweatshirt. I did get the chance to have some nice chats with people from like EECC Travels, and I also met Marilyn and Frank from NYC Rocks You. There were a lot of content creators on board, I would say, who are around the same level as I am, and then there were some of the really big names too. There was one guy who I had never heard of before, but Jesse knew who he was. I'm not gonna say who it was, but he was really kind of rude, I have to say. When we were in the buffet, he was walking around filming. Jesse went up to get some kind of food, and she said he literally put his camera like right in front of her face to film like a carved watermelon in a dragon, and said something like, "That must be the biggest watermelon dragon ever." And Jesse said the camera was like right here in front of her face as he's filming. Unnecessary. And I saw the same guy while I was waiting to do the water slides. Water slides, amazing water park on board. We're not going to talk about this one. And there was a little bit of a line the day I was there, and he came walking up the stairs, walked directly through the line with his camera out, talking to his camera, stopped in front of us there, was talking about the slides, filming people he doesn't know, going down the slides, and then he just turned around, walked the other way, back down through the crowd, not saying, "Oh, excuse me, can I get through here, please?" Just with his camera out in front of his face, as if he was having a conversation with friends, and basically ignoring the actual people that were there at the moment that he, I'm gonna say, was disturbing. Sorry about that again. Not all of us act that way. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to get interesting video footage. I understand. Okay, two more quick bonus things that I noticed on my flight. First of all, the guy sitting next to me, who was, I'm going to say, probably around 28, 29 years old, so somewhere in his 20s. We're going to say, like, he was giving off graduate student vibes. And this was for the long flight, so the 7.5 hours from Detroit to Amsterdam. By the way, the travel part of this trip to the United States went off so much more smoothly than the last time I went to the United States. And my luggage made it too, but that's because I didn't check in any bags. Anyways, this guy sitting next to me, for the the entire flight, he never drank anything. He did have the dinner and he did have the breakfast, but he didn't order any water, any coffee, any cola. He didn't drink anything the whole flight. And I just wonder why that is. Is he like, does he not want to have to go to the bathroom, or maybe he had some other kind of situation? I don't know. It seemed odd to me. I thought if I didn't drink anything on a flight, I would have bright red eyes and totally cracked, chapped lips by the time I got to my destination. And there was somebody else who I think drank a little too much because they peed their pants. Yes, this was a young girl. I'm going to say she was like 8 years old. I didn't see it happening, but I saw the aftermath and heard her parents talking about it with other people around them. Apparently, this little girl waited until we were on the approach to landing to tell her parents, "I have to pee right now." In the conversation I overheard with the parents talking with the people around them, parents were saying, yeah, we asked her if she had to go and she didn't have to go until she couldn't go, but then she went. Poor little girl. I'm sure that's very stressful too. I mean, yeah, nobody wants to walk around with pee-pee pants. And what about the person who has to sit on that seat on the next flight? Poor thing. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories about people I saw on the cruise. Check back in a couple days for another video from On Board the Star of the Seas, where you're going to see a lot more of what it was like. And I thank you for spending this part of your Sunday, or whatever day it is you choose to watch this with me. I'm Morgan from the Very Unofficial Travel Guides. See you soon.
So until next time, I'll leave alone just like that. I'm back to being sober. We'll leave it